The story of a third atomic bomb has largely faded into obscurity, overshadowed by the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yet it marks one of the most critical turning points of the 20th century, a moment when the direction of global warfare and diplomacy could have drastically changed. After the second bomb detonated over Nagasaki on August 9, 1945, most of the world assumed the United States had fired its last nuclear shot, that those two bombs were the full extent of the Manhattan Project's terrible achievement. That assumption could not have been more wrong. Even as the mushroom cloud rose over Nagasaki, scientists and engineers at Los Alamos were already preparing the core for a third atomic bomb. President Harry Truman was actively considering where this next weapon should be used. The Manhattan Project had not delivered two bombs and then ceased production. The enormous industrial system supporting the program, from uranium enrichment at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, to plutonium generation at Hanford, Washington, and final assembly at Los Alamos, New Mexico, continued operating at maximum capacity. General Leslie Groves, the military head of the project, had established a steady production schedule for nuclear cores. The third plutonium core was expected to be completed by August 19, just 10 days after Nagasaki. Additional cores would follow at intervals of roughly 3 to 4 days through August and into September, with production accelerating as the process became more refined. This third bomb was not a distant plan on paper. It was a physical weapon nearing completion. Plutonium from the Hanford reactors was being precisely machined at Los Alamos. The high explosive lenses needed to compress the core into a nuclear chain reaction were being manufactured and tested. The ballistic shell, another Fat Man design, was under construction. Everything was on schedule, and military leaders were already considering not only the third bomb, but a prolonged atomic bombing campaign that could extend into late 1945 and even 1946 if Japan did not surrender. Understanding where Truman intended to drop this third bomb requires a look at the strategic thinking in Washington during those tense days. The initial atomic target list had been compiled through extensive analysis by military planners, scientists, and intelligence specialists. In the spring of 1945, a target committee met repeatedly to select cities that fulfilled strict requirements. The targets needed to be significant enough that their destruction would shock Japan's leadership into surrender. They had to be relatively untouched by prior bombing, so the atomic blast's devastation would be undeniable. And they needed military or industrial value, at least in theory, though in practice civilian casualties were unavoidable. The early list included Hiroshima, Kokura, Nagata, and Nagasaki. Kyoto, Japan's ancient capital and cultural treasure, had originally been the top recommendation due to its size and industry. But Secretary of War Henry Stimson insisted it be spared, warning that destroying Japan's cultural center would breed permanent hatred and obstruct any post-war peace. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki were reduced to ruins, two cities from the original list remained: Kokura and Nagata. Military planners also examined other possibilities, including Tokyo. Despite severe firebombing, Tokyo still housed important government and military facilities, and its symbolic importance was unmatched. The emperor's residence, the imperial palace, lay at its heart. Evidence strongly indicates that Tokyo was becoming the leading candidate for the third atomic strike. Such a decision would have marked a dramatic escalation, an attack not merely on a strategic city, but on the very center of the Japanese empire. The Japanese government ministries directing the war effort were concentrated in Tokyo. Reducing the capital with an atomic strike would have delivered a chilling message. No part of Japan was beyond reach, and not even the emperor, considered sacred, could be shielded from this unprecedented weapon. General Henry Hap Arnold, commander of the U.S. Army Air Forces, already possessed authority to continue atomic attacks without direct presidential approval for each strike. The July 25th order instructed that bombs be used against Japanese targets as soon as they were ready. This meant that once the third bomb was assembled, it would be transported to Tinian Island, where the 509th Composite Group waited with its specially modified B-29s and could be dropped within days. By then, the machinery of the atomic war was fully engaged. Halting it would require Truman to actively intervene, not simply postpone decisions. His mindset during this period reveals the difficult balance he struggled to maintain, trying to bring a devastating war to an end while confronting a weapon capable of slaughter on a scale never before imagined. Truman's statements and diary entries reflect both his resolve to force Japan to surrender and his growing unease about the mass killing of civilians. After hearing a more detailed account of Hiroshima's destruction, he is believed to have told his cabinet he did not want to kill all those children. Yet the president was also convinced, based on intelligence and the brutal island battles that had marked the Pacific War, that invading Japan's home islands would cost hundreds of thousands of American lives and potentially millions of Japanese lives. Time was working against everyone in August 1945. Every additional day that Japan fought brought new deaths. Allied prisoners of war in horrific camps across Asia, civilians suffering under Japanese rule, and soldiers still dying in China, Burma, and throughout the Pacific. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union entered the war against Japan on August 8, fulfilling a pledge made at Yalta. Soviet armies surged across Manchuria, crushing Japanese forces with stunning speed. Their assault demonstrated that the Red Army, hardened by 4 brutal years against Nazi Germany, could dismantle Japanese defenses far faster than expected.
This development introduced a dangerous geopolitical threat. If Japan delayed surrender, Soviet troops might occupy substantial territory, possibly including the northern Japanese islands. The resulting division of occupation zones could mirror what would later happen in Germany and Korea. Inside Japan, the government was immobilized by fierce internal conflict. Even after Hiroshima, after Nagasaki, and even after the Soviet invasion, the Supreme Council for the direction of the war remained split down the middle. A peace faction, led by Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo and Navy Minister Mitsumasa Yunai, pushed to accept the terms of the Potsdam Declaration, unconditional surrender, with one crucial requirement, that the emperor and the imperial institution be preserved. The hardline military faction, led by War Minister Korochika Anami, along with the Army and Navy Chiefs of Staff, refused to accept surrender unless multiple conditions were granted: no foreign occupation of the Japanese homeland, Japan retaining control over disarmament, and Japanese authorities overseeing any trials of war criminals. Because they insisted on these demands, the government remained paralyzed, even as cities were reduced to ashes and atomic bombs rained down. In this stalemate, Emperor Hirohito became the decisive actor. In an unprecedented break from imperial tradition, he personally intervened twice, on August 10th and again more forcefully on August 14th, following a failed coup by officers determined to prevent surrender. The emperor directly ordered the government to accept Allied terms. His intervention almost certainly prevented the third atomic bomb and likely further bombs from being used. But the margin was razor thin. Had Hirohito remained silent, or had the coup succeeded, the atomic bombing campaign would have continued without pause. The plutonium core intended for the third bomb did reach Tinian Island, but by the time it arrived, Japan had communicated its intention to surrender. Instead of being dropped on another Japanese city, the core was eventually used in 1946 as part of a nuclear test at Bikini Atoll, the 4th nuclear detonation in human history. The massive industrial and scientific system that produced these weapons did not vanish after the war. It became the backbone of the United States' rapidly expanding Cold War nuclear arsenal, and the knowledge required to build atomic weapons soon spread to other nations, laying the foundation for the global nuclear standoff that would define international relations for decades. The implications of what nearly occurred with the third bomb reach far beyond the immediate question of Japan's surrender. If Tokyo had been destroyed, resulting in hundreds of thousands more deaths and possibly killing Emperor Hirohito, the post-war political structure in Asia could have looked radically different. The U.S. occupation relied heavily on preserving the imperial institution as a stabilizing force. Without the emperor to legitimize reforms, Japan's rebuilding process could have descended into chaos or civil conflict. An atomic attack on Tokyo, the symbolic heart of Japanese society, might have created a far deeper reservoir of resentment. The long-term alliance between the United States and Japan, now one of the cornerstones of global security, might never have formed. The atomic bombing campaign against Japan, conventional and atomic, remains one of the most ethically troubling chapters in American military history. In a single night of firebombing on March 9-10, 1945, Tokyo suffered more deaths than Hiroshima. Dozens of other cities were systematically burned with incendiaries designed to kill civilians and destroy morale. What set atomic bombs apart was not their choice of targets. Civilians had already become the primary victims of strategic bombing, but their horrifying efficiency. One plane, one bomb, one city, destroyed. The third bomb would have continued this pattern, and the fourth, fifth, and sixth atomic weapons, already in production, would have followed. Debate continues among historians. Some argue that Japan was already defeated and would have surrendered soon due to the naval blockade cutting off food and supplies, combined with the Soviet invasion destroying Japan's armies in Manchuria. Others contend the bombs were necessary to compel surrender quickly, noting that the military leadership still resisted even after 2 atomic strikes and Soviet intervention. The truth is likely somewhere in between, uncertain and impossible to test because history cannot be replayed under different conditions. What is certain is that U.S. decision-makers in August 1945 believed they had to maintain maximum pressure, including further atomic attacks, to force Japan's surrender before the planned invasion of Kyushu in November.
The planned production schedule for additional atomic weapons in August and September 1945 demonstrates how quickly nuclear warfare was becoming standardized. No longer a rare or extraordinary capability, but a replicable, routine instrument of war. By late August, Los Alamos projected a manufacturing pace that would allow 2 or even 3 atomic bombing missions each week by September. The 509th Composite Group already had multiple trained air crews and modified bombers ready for continued nuclear operations. The logistical chain for transporting, assembling, and deploying atomic devices was functioning smoothly. If the war had continued, the atomic bomb would likely have become just one more weapon in the U.S. arsenal, used alongside incendiary raids, naval bombardments, and the preparations for invasion. The perception of Hiroshima and Nagasaki as unique, war-ending events was not predetermined. Japan's surrender froze events before atomic bombing became an ongoing and regular campaign. General Douglas MacArthur, designated to lead Operation Downfall, the invasion of Japan, initially believed the atomic bomb would play only a marginal role compared to the immense conventional forces assembled for the assault. However, after witnessing Japan's shock response to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, MacArthur acknowledged that the bombs had spared the world a brutal invasion that would have cost countless lives.
Yet he also recognized that the successful occupation of Japan and its transformation into a peaceful democracy depended on maintaining enough governmental and social structure for the country to function. An atomic attack on Tokyo might have wiped out too much of that infrastructure, making reconstruction nearly impossible. Among the scientists of the Manhattan Project, opinions about the bomb's use varied greatly. Figures such as Leo Szilard and James Franck urged a non-lethal demonstration of nuclear power, hoping that merely showing the bomb's capabilities would force surrender without mass civilian casualties. Others, including J. Robert Oppenheimer and most of the technical staff, supported targeting military-industrial sites, though many later expressed profound remorse about their creation. A third group, typified by Edward Teller, felt little hesitation and even pushed for developing far more destructive weapons. These divisions continued into the Cold War. Some veterans of the project became passionate advocates of arms control, while others argued for rapid expansion of nuclear arsenals. The third atomic bomb, that was never dropped, stands as a turning point in history that almost occurred. In another possible timeline, that bomb annihilated Tokyo or another major Japanese city, killing tens or hundreds of thousands more people, perhaps including the emperor himself, and reshaping post-war Asia in ways we can only speculate about. In the timeline we inherited, Japan surrendered just in time to prevent this added disaster. Whether this outcome was due to strategic calculation, sheer timing, or Emperor Hirohito's intervention remains debated. What is indisputable is that by mid-August 1945, the United States possessed everything required to continue nuclear bombardment indefinitely. Military and political leaders were fully prepared to use additional bombs until Japan capitulated. And only the surrender announcement on August 15th prevented the third, and the fourth, and the fifth from being dropped on Japanese cities in the final weeks of that fateful summer.